Welcome back. Using art and humor to tell the story of how racism has shaped America. Stamped from the beginning, A Graphic History of Racist Ideas in America is a new telling of the 2016 National Book Award winner, which was published first 7 years ago. Joining us today are Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. He's the best-selling author, professor, and director of the Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University. Yes, and Joel Christian Gill, cartoonist, associate professor of art, and chair of Department of Visual Narrative, also at the Boston University. Ibram, tell me, why are you using a graphic novel for this next iteration?
Well, I think it's a new way to reach a new set of readers who I think everyone needs to know this history of anti-Black racist ideas, this enduring history that still causes people to think there's something wrong with Black people. And there are people who read the original 500-page plus narrative history, but there are other people who may not, but they would read a graphic novel like this one.
It's very well done. We've got one right here on the set. Joel, you're not only a cartoonist, but you're also an historian.
Yes.
What made you want to illustrate this book?
I mean, I think it's a similar thing. I think the importance of telling these stories and putting them out there into the world. Comics are a sneaky way to teach people things. And so the more we can get these stories out, the more we can get people to read them, the more people will understand how these ideas affect everybody. And, you know, comics build empathy, and you can tell that they're building empathy because they keep banning books, right? Because the people who are in power who don't want you to see these things and don't want you to have that empathy don't want you to read these things. And I think it's important to get as many of these books out as we possibly can.
That's an interesting point about comics. Racist ideas are a heavy topic, but you decided to use humor to treat the subject. Give us an example of where and how you did that.
One of my favorite examples is, and this is actually like more of a like a connection between me and Dr. Kendi. When I was writing this, I was writing the section when Dr. King is speaking on the March on Washington, and Dr. Kendi had just had this article in the Atlantic that was published about how people were misappropriating Dr. King's message, and I had just drawn this image of Dr. King saying, "I have a dream that one day white girls will post a square and on the Instagram, or Republicans will use my words to win political arguments," and then he keeps having this "I have a dream," where it's like he's talking about what people are doing right now. So I thought that was I was proud of myself for that.
Okay, sounds good. Now, Ibram, is this book for adults or young people? And if it's the latter, do you expect that this book could get swept up in all of the school and library book bans like some of your other books?
Well, I think the beauty about comics, the beauty about graphic novels, is that it's really accessible to all ages. And so it's young people and adults. And unfortunately, any book that's telling the truth about American history, any book that's actually accessible to young people, that young people are reading, is being banned. And so I suspect this book could be banned as well.
What do you think about this book ban thing? It's just crazy, isn't it?
It is. On the other hand, there's a long history to this. Enslavers banned abolitionist literature. Jim Crow segregationists banned literature that were about civil rights. And so just as today you have people who are trying to conserve racism are banning literature that documents the history and presence of racism.
The expression "knowledge is power" comes to mind. So if you don't have the knowledge, then they're taking away the power. That's really the bottom line, isn't it?
Exactly. And you know, one prominent abolitionist talked about the enslaving South as a place where they legislate for ignorance. And unfortunately, people are still legislating for ignorance today.
Joel, was there anything that was particularly challenging in this book for you to depict?
I don't think there was anything that was challenging. I think in the beginning, in the intro specifically, when I draw Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, like that was I made a specific and purposeful decision not to cartoon them, to make them real people. and to draw and drawing violence, violence on Black people is really difficult. It's soul crushing at certain points because these are people who were really connected to who I am as a person, right? And so that was difficult in the process, but that was one of the reasons why I spent so much time making things funny, right? Because you need that humor to keep you from basically crawling into a hole when you're reading these things and seeing people say these things and be right over the decades.
Ibram, we are well past 2008 when the election of a Black president signified for some that we're now in a post-racial society. In Stamped, you say that racism has evolved. So where are we now, 15 years later?
Well, I think there are certain places and spaces where we see racial progress, where we see Black people and other groups of people standing in positions of power that they were not 50 years ago. You see, in certain cases, racial disparities narrowing. But in many other cases, you see racial disparities and inequities persisting, if not growing. You see Black people still being killed by police, still being incarcerated at higher rates. And so to me, it's a mixed bag. And one of the things we chronicle in Stamped from the Beginning, in this graphic novel, is not just racial progress, but also the progression of racism. And it's the progression of racism that has created the persisting racial inequities in our society.
And in fact, in turning back the clock in many regards, this past week, the Supreme Court ruled on Students for Fair Admissions, Incorporated versus University of North Carolina, the affirmative action case. What's your take on this?
Well, to me, the court struck down affirmative action on the premise that it was using race. It was race-based admissions, and the other admission factors were, quote, not race-based, were race-neutral. And to me, that's a fallacy. It's a fallacy to say that standardized tests are not race-based or legacies are not race-based. And it's indeed a new fallacy that's conserving racism, just like an old fallacy like separate but equal, because everyone knew the schools in Mississippi were not separate but equal, but still the court used that doctrine to conserve racism, and now the court is using the fallacy of race-neutral admissions factors to conserve racism again.
I'm sure an issue you'll be following very closely at the Center for Anti-Racist Research. Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and Joel Christian Gill from Boston University. Thank you for joining us. Their new book, Stamped from the Beginning, A Graphic History of Racist Ideas in America, is available now